What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most respected icons may have left behind a notebook so scandalous, so damning, that it could have destroyed the reputations of some of the biggest stars of the Golden Age? That's the story tied to Burt Lancaster, the Oscar-winning actor of From Here to Eternity, and Elmer Gantry, the charismatic swashbuckler turned activist who marched beside Martin Luther King Jr. For decades, Lancaster was considered one of Hollywood's moral anchors, principled, outspoken, and fiercely independent. So when rumors spread that he had compiled a secret list, a blacklist of 14 names, all beloved stars of the silver screen, each one allegedly guilty of cruelty, manipulation, or worse, people paid attention. The story suggested Lancaster wanted to pull back the curtain before his death, to expose the rot underneath Hollywood's golden glow. But here's the catch. No one has ever produced this notebook. No archives, no estate papers, no credible biographers citing it. Instead, the claim exists mostly in whispers, repeated in online articles and videos that reference one another without ever producing proof. And yet, the idea has taken on a life of its own, fueling endless speculation about who was on the list, what secrets they kept, and why a man like Lancaster would feel compelled to write it. Tonight, we're not just repeating the rumor, we're breaking it down. We'll look at the stars most often tied to this phantom blacklist: Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Errol Flynn, Spencer Tracy, Bing Crosby, Natalie Wood, and examine what's fact, what's rumor, and what sits in the uncomfortable middle. In doing so, we'll discover something far more interesting than a single notebook: the way myths and scandals define Hollywood just as much as Oscars and applause. The secret list that no one can find. Every good mystery begins with a document: a lost diary, a hidden manuscript, a letter stashed away in an attic trunk. The Lancaster notebook supposedly fits that mold perfectly. A personal record, written by an insider, pointing fingers at 14 of the most adored stars of the 20th century. The first time this revelation popped up in a big way was through articles and YouTube channels in the past decade. Each retelling followed the same beats. Lancaster, in his later years, wrote down the names of actors he considered the most malicious of his time. The names varied slightly, but the core list always included the same suspects: Taylor, Douglas, Wood, Rooney, Monroe, Flynn, Tracy, Stewart, Fonda, Crawford, Ball, Crosby, and sometimes their children. The problem? When you trace the story backwards, you never hit bedrock. There's no original newspaper clipping, no interview transcript, no estate auction where the notebook appeared. Just a hall of mirrors, one article quoting another, one video echoing the next. And yet, the idea works because it taps into something audiences crave: the fantasy that a moral insider, someone untouchable like Lancaster, could cut through Hollywood's lies and tell the truth. It's a story that feels too good to ignore. After all, old Hollywood built itself on image-making. Studios controlled not just contracts, but lives, arranging marriages, covering up scandals, crafting entire personalities out of thin air. The thought that someone had punctured that illusion from the inside scratches a very deep itch. So even without evidence, the blacklist lingers. It's a story people want to believe because it suggests there's a key to unlock Hollywood's shadows. But since the notebook itself has never surfaced, we're left examining the stars it supposedly targeted, and their reputations, which range from beloved to notorious. Elizabeth Taylor, Cleopatra, and the Price of Power. Elizabeth Taylor's name often sits right at the top of Lancaster's alleged list. And it's not hard to see why. Taylor wasn't just a star, she was a phenomenon. With her violet eyes and commanding presence, she dominated the screen, and the tabloids. The story told in the Lancaster rumor is that during the filming of Cleopatra in 1962, Taylor brought production to a halt for 14 hours because another actress wore a dress too similar to hers. When the director tried to intervene, she allegedly threw a glass of wine in his face. Dramatic, yes. Documented, no. What is true is that Cleopatra was one of the most chaotic productions in film history. Filming began in London, where Taylor fell gravely ill and nearly died from pneumonia. Production then shifted to Rome, forcing the studio to rebuild massive sets at astronomical cost. Directors came and went. The love affair between Taylor and Richard Burton became headline news worldwide, sparking outrage from the Vatican and delighting gossip columnists. By the time the film premiered in 1963, it had nearly bankrupted 20th Century Fox. Taylor knew her power, and she wielded it. She became the first actress to command $1 million salary, a sum that seemed unthinkable at the time. She fought for script approval, co-star choices, and even profit shares, reshaping the balance of power between stars and studios. To some, that made her a feminist trailblazer. To others, a diva who held productions hostage to her whims. And that's what makes her such a compelling figure in this story. Whether or not she ever halted filming over a dress, Taylor's reputation for demanding control, in her marriages, in her films, in her career, ensured she'd be remembered as both adored and feared. But Taylor was hardly alone in drawing accusations of manipulation. Marilyn Monroe, the fragility that shaped a masterpiece. If Elizabeth Taylor embodied power, Marilyn Monroe embodied vulnerability. Or at least that was the image the studios crafted. The breathy, innocent blonde who seemed both alluring and breakable. Behind the scenes, Monroe's life was far more complex. On the set of Some Like It Hot in 1959, her behavior became legendary. She showed up late, sometimes by hours. She forgot lines, even simple ones, forcing endless retakes. Director Billy Wilder was exasperated. Tony Curtis later quipped that kissing Monroe was like kissing Hitler, not out of ideology but out of sheer frustration with the constant delays. And yet, when the cameras rolled, something magical happened. Wilder admitted with both irritation and awe that no one else could have played Sugar Cane the way Monroe did. Her timing, her fragility, her presence, all of it made the film the classic it remains today. Lancaster's alleged notebook paints Monroe as manipulative, using her supposed fragility as a weapon. The truth is probably more tragic. Monroe struggled with mental health, addiction, and the crushing weight of fame. She was trapped in a system that wanted her to be a caricature, not a person. Her late nights and missed cues weren't acts of cruelty. They were symptoms of a deeper pain. Still, in the ruthless world of Hollywood productions, where every delay cost thousands, her reputation as difficult stuck. And legends like Lancaster's List thrive on reputations, not realities. Errol Flynn, the trial that haunted a legend. If Monroe was fragile and Taylor powerful, Errol Flynn was dangerous. At least that's how the rumors painted him. Flynn was the ultimate swashbuckler, dashing and charismatic, with a grin that sold tickets by the millions. But in 1942, his off-screen life collided with the law. Flynn was accused of statutory rape by 2 underage girls. The trial was a sensation, splashed across every newspaper in America. In 1943, he was acquitted, but the stain never disappeared. The phrase, "in like Flynn," became shorthand for his reputation as a womanizer, even as his career continued. The Lancaster narrative takes this further, portraying Flynn as a devil in a gentleman's suit, hosting wild parties filled with drugs and exploitation, even hinting at crimes never proven. Did he live recklessly? Absolutely. Did he abuse his fame? Almost certainly. But did he run the criminal empire that rumor sometimes suggests? The record doesn't back that up. Flynn remains one of the clearest examples of how myth and fact blur. The trial was real, the acquittal real, the reputation complicated. Over time, exaggerations piled on top of exaggerations, turning him from a flawed man into a larger-than-life monster in the public imagination. Spencer Tracy, the genius haunted by alcohol. Few actors commanded respect like Spencer Tracy. His performances in films like Judgment at Nuremberg and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner remain towering achievements. On screen, he projected strength, intelligence, and compassion. Off-screen, he was often consumed by alcohol. Biographers describe two Spencers: the sober professional craftsman beloved by colleagues and the drunk, volatile figure who could lash out without warning. His long relationship with Katharine Hepburn endured despite his drinking, but many who worked with him remember the strain. The Lancaster myth turns these struggles into accusations of cruelty, portraying Tracy as a violent manipulator. The truth is both simpler and sadder. He was a brilliant actor battling addiction in an era when treatment was poorly understood and stigma was crushing. Did his drinking hurt people around him? Almost certainly. Was he the devil described in rumor? That's less clear. Tracy's legacy, like Flynn's, shows how flaws magnify under fame. The greater the pedestal, the harder the fall when cracks appear. Bing Crosby, the voice of Christmas, the shadow at home. For millions, Bing Crosby was the soundtrack of family life. His voice filled living rooms every December. His films painted him as the affable, easygoing everyman. But in 1983, his son Gary published Going My Own Way, a memoir that shattered that image. Gary accused his father of being cold, controlling, and sometimes abusive. He described punishments that felt harsh, a childhood defined by fear more than love. The revelations were shocking. Other Crosby children disputed his account, insisting Gary had exaggerated, but the damage was done. Suddenly, Bing Crosby was no longer just the man who sang White Christmas. He was also the man accused of mistreating his family. For fans, it was a jarring contradiction. For rumor mills, it was gold. The Lancaster myth folded Crosby neatly into its narrative of cruelty hidden behind charm. The truth? Like most families, the Crosby household was complicated. Memories clashed, perspectives diverged, and the public was left with two competing pictures: the beloved crooner and the feared patriarch. Which was more accurate? Probably both. Natalie Wood, the mystery that refuses to die. Of all the stars tied to Lancaster's alleged notebook, none carries as much mystery as Natalie Wood. Her career spanned classics like West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause. Her beauty and vulnerability made her unforgettable. But her death in 1981 is what cemented her legend. Wood drowned off the coast of California after an evening on a yacht with her husband Robert Wagner and actor Christopher Walken. The official ruling was accidental drowning, but questions arose immediately. Why was she in the water? What happened in the hours before? Witness accounts conflicted. Decades later, the case was reopened, with Wagner named a person of interest. In 2022, authorities announced there was no evidence to pursue charges. Still, the rumors have never stopped. Some believe she was the victim of foul play. Others insist it was a tragic accident. Her sister Lana has pushed for answers, while her daughter Natasha remains convinced it was simply misfortune. The Lancaster myth folds Wood into its narrative as manipulative, hinting her death was the price of her schemes. That framing is cruel and unsubstantiated. What's real is the tragedy, the unanswered questions, and the fascination that refuses to fade. So why do myths like Burt Lancaster's notebook survive, even thrive, when the evidence is so thin? The answer is simple. We crave certainty in a world of contradictions. It's easier to believe in a secret list that labels villains than to wrestle with the messy truth that heroes and monsters can live in the same person. Hollywood is built on myth-making. Studios crafted stars like products. Publicists buried scandals and amplified virtues. Audiences bought into the fantasy because they wanted to believe. And when the curtain is pulled back, even a little, the fall from grace is irresistible. That's why lists like Lancaster's resonate. They offer the illusion of clarity. They promise to tell us who was good and who was evil. But real history is never that neat. Elizabeth Taylor was both a demanding diva and a groundbreaking trailblazer. Marilyn Monroe was both unreliable and irreplaceable. Errol Flynn was both acquitted and forever tainted. Bing Crosby was both beloved and feared. Natalie Wood was both adored and forever mysterious. So, did Burt Lancaster truly leave behind a blacklist of Hollywood's darkest figures? Probably not. There's no notebook, no hard evidence, no verifiable source. What we have are rumors layered on top of real scandals, exaggerations built on kernels of truth, myths that grow because they're too entertaining to die. And yet, even if the notebook itself is fiction, the stories it tells us to examine are real. The golden age of Hollywood was glamorous on the surface and deeply troubled underneath. Stars were human, with flaws magnified by fame and power. Some did harm. Some suffered harm. Many did both. The lesson isn't that we should cling to myths of hidden notebooks and blacklists. The lesson is that we should approach every story, especially the ones too perfect to be true, with skepticism and curiosity. Because in the end, the truth of old Hollywood isn't found in a phantom diary. It's found in the messy, complicated, contradictory lives of the people who built it. And maybe that's even more fascinating. So now I'll leave it to you. Do you think Lancaster truly kept a list of Hollywood's darkest stars? Or was this just another Hollywood invention, a story as carefully crafted as any movie? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because the silver screen still has plenty more secrets waiting to be uncovered.